Good morning students, today I shall discuss the topic called arrays in Java. So let's start with it. An array is a group of values of the same data type. That means we can define an array to be a variable that can hold a list of values, and all those values should be of the same data type. For example, in a class full of students, the list of age of all the students of the class can be an example of an array of integers. This is because the age of the students has to be numeric in nature. It cannot be of character type. So when we talk of age, it's usually numeric in nature, such that the age can be 13 for a student, 16 for a student, 8 for another student, and so on. As a result, an array variable that can hold the list of age of all the students in a class has to be of the data type integer. And integer data type is denoted by the keyword int. Now when the array variable holds the list of values that corresponds to the age of each student in a class, then those values assigned to the array variable are located in certain memory locations, and the list of values assigned to the array variable are arranged in the memory locations one after another, and we call this arrangement of values for that array to be of sequential in nature. That means array allocates memory contiguously. So contiguous means memory is allocated for the stored values inside an array sequentially or one after another. Then come to the next point. The values stored in an array are also known as elements. So we call the individual values of an array to be elements. Now consider the case of this array. The name of this array variable is sales data. This array variable identified by the name sales data consists of a range of values starting from 23, 45, 67 till 97. So how many values this array variable sales data contain? Let's count it. This is the first one, second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one, seventh one, 8, 9, 10. So in total this array variable called sales data contain 10 values. And we call these individual values of this array called sales data as elements. That means the values 23, 45, 67, 78, all these are known as the elements. So 23 is the first element, 45 is the second element, 67 is the third element of the array, and in the same way 97 is the last element of the array called sales data. And if you see here, each element of the array is stored one after another in sequential manner. When elements are stored one after another in this fashion, we say that the elements are stored in sequential manner. So in this array called sales data, the elements are stored one after another, which is sequential in nature. Now again, each of these elements inside the array called sales data are stored in their respective memory locations. And since these array elements are stored sequentially, so the memory locations where these array elements are allotted are also arranged sequentially. So we can say that the memory allotment of each of these elements inside the array called sales data is done sequentially or contiguously. That's why it has been said in the third point that array allocates memory contiguously. Now see the fifth point. It says each element is referred by a number called index or the subscript number. In Java, the subscript number starts with 0. Now if you look at this array called sales data, each element inside this array starting from 23, 45, 67 till 97, they are referred by a number below. Okay, so we call these numbers as the index or the subscript, and this index or the subscript number always starts with 0. So remember this. That's why for this array called sales data, the index starts with 0 as shown here. Now from this array called sales data, we can easily find the index for a particular element of the array. Okay, let's find the index for the element 90 in this array. Obviously, the index is 4 as represented by the number below the element 90. In the same way, the index for the number 56 is 7. The index for the number 97 is 9. The index for the number 67 is 2. And the index for the number 23 is 0. So these numbers, they represent the elements, and these numbers, they represent the index of the corresponding elements. Now for this array called sales data, the index starts with the number 0 and ends with the number 9. Okay, now when the index starts with the number 0 and ends with the number 9, can you count the total number of elements? Okay, if you count the total number of elements from 0 till 9, it comes to 10. So we can say that for our array called sales data, there are 10 elements. That means we can say that for our array called sales data with 10 elements, the last index is 1 less than that is 9. So you remember that the last index value of an array is always 1 less than the total number of elements of the array. Now take another example of an array consisting of 6 elements. Okay, now for that array consisting of a total of 6 elements, what will be its last index? It will be 1 less than the total number of elements, which in that case is 6. Now if it's 1 less than the total number of elements in that array, which is 6, okay, then the last index of that array comprising of 6 elements shall be 5. That is why we can now say that for an array having n number of elements, the last index of the array will be n minus 1. And this is clearly explained here. If an array is having n number of elements, then the index of the last element will be n minus 1. Okay, now put the value of n as 10 here. Okay, so now if an array is having 10 number of elements where the value of n is equal to 10, then the index of the last element will be n minus 1. Now with n bearing the value 10, okay, n minus 1 shall give you 10 minus 1, which is 9. Okay, this shows that for an array having 10 number of elements, the index of the last element will be 9. Again, take the case of that array with 6 elements, okay, where the value of n shall be equal to 6. Okay, now in that case, the index of the last element will be n minus 1, which gives 6 minus 1, and that is 5. So for that array with 6 number of elements, the index of the last element shall be 5. Now see the last point. It says in Java we can declare two types of arrays: single dimensional array and multi-dimensional array. Now single dimensional arrays are the most commonly used types of array. Now single dimensional arrays are those arrays where the elements are stored contiguously, one after another. Now this is an example of a single dimensional array where the elements are stored one after another contiguously, or we can say sequentially. Now the name of this array is sales data, okay, which holds these elements 23, 45, 67 till 97 at their respective index locations, which is 0 for 23, 1 for 45, 2 for 67, and so on, and at the end the index 9 for the element 97. Now this is just a pictorial representation of the array named sales data. Now if we need to declare this single dimensional array called sales data, we have to follow a particular syntax. Now see the syntax of declaring the single dimensional array. The syntax goes like this. At first you have to specify the data type, followed by the square bracket, and then the name of the array, and at the end terminate that declaration with a semicolon. Now for our array called sales data, okay, which consists of integer elements, we declare it like this: int, then the box followed by the array variable name, which is sales data, and then terminate it with a semicolon. Now this declaration of the array called sales data follows this syntax. Now int here represents the data type of the array. Now box denotes the variable that this is an array variable, and sales data is the array name. Now if you omit this box from the array variable called sales data, okay, then the declaration becomes like this: int sales data, and in this case this variable sales data is no longer an array variable. This acts as an ordinary variable. An array variable should always be preceded by a box-like symbol like this. So this box denotes that the variable sales data is an array variable and it can store a range of values. Now what is the difference between the array variable and an ordinary variable? An ordinary variable, okay, can store only one particular value, whereas the array variable can store a range of values. So if you wish to assign only one value to an variable, do not declare that variable to be as an array. But if you wish to store range of values into a variable, then declare that variable as an array, and for that you have to precede that variable with a box-like symbol like this. So the first declaration represents that the variable sales data is an array variable, and the second representation shows that the variable sales data is an ordinary variable, okay, and the ordinary variable can store only one particular value, whereas the array variable can store a range of values. Now in our case, this variable sales data is an array variable because it consists of a range of elements starting from 2345 till 97. So we have to declare this array variable sales data like this: int box followed by the array name, which is sales data, and then end it with a semicolon. Now let's come to the next topic, that is initializing single dimensional array. Okay, now initializing means assigning certain value, okay, to an array variable. So when these elements starting from 23, 45, 67 till 97 are assigned to this array variable called sales data, we say that initialization has been done for our array called sales data. So in this case, assigning these elements to this array variable sales data is known as initializing the array sales data. Now although arrays are declared, the memory is not allocated until it is initialized. That means memory space shall be allocated for this array called sales data only when the array is filled up with these elements. Or we can say that memory shall be allocated to this array variable sales data only when this array shall be initialized with these elements. And if the array does not contain any elements, then no memory shall be allotted to the array. Now this statement, that is int box sales data, it just declares an array variable by the name sales data of int as a data type. This statement hasn't initialized the array variable called sales data with these elements. Now if you wish to initialize this array variable called sales data with these elements, then just after declaring the array variable called sales data with this statement, okay, then in the next statement you have to declare the size of our array variable called sales data. And since this array variable contains 10 elements, so I shall declare the size of this array variable called sales data to be 10, and that is represented as sales data equal to new int, then the size 10 should be within bracket. And the new keyword here allocates memory locations for this array called sales data to hold 10 values. Okay, so this new keyword allocates memory spaces for our array variable called sales data to hold 10 values. And this is called as initialization. Now since we are initializing the array called sales data with these elements at their respective indexes, we can assign the values for this array called sales data in this manner. The first value 23 gets assigned to the array variable sales data at the index 0, okay, which is this one, that at the index 0 the value 23 has been assigned. The second value 45 has been assigned to the array variable sales data at the index 1, and this has been shown here. At the index 1 you can see the value 45. The third value 67 has been assigned to the array variable sales data at the index 2, and this is shown here. At the index 2 the value assigned for the array is 67. And in the similar way, all these values are assigned to the array variable sales data at their respective index locations. Now the last element 97 is assigned to the array variable sales data at the index 9, and this is shown here. The last value 97 is stored at the index 9. So in this way our array sales data has been initialized with the values, so that the array gets filled up with these elements. Then come below, see the note. It says double slash, okay, double slash like this. It indicates a comment line, okay. That means you see the first declaration statement for declaring the variable called sales data, which is an array variable, okay. Now that this statement, okay, is a declaration statement of an array variable, so that, okay, that is depicted by this comment line called declaration, okay. Now how do you know that this is a comment? Because this word declaration is preceded by a double slash. So whenever any sentence or a word or a text is preceded by a double slash, okay, we can say that that particular word or a sentence or a text is a comment. So in this case declaration is a comment. Now again the next statement initializes the array by allocating memory spaces for holding 10 values. So this is initialization, and I have depicted that with the help of the word initialization after double slash. So double slash, as it indicates a comment, so initialization here denotes that it is a comment. Now keep in mind one thing, that the number in square brackets defines the size of the array, okay. So in this case when you initialize the array, the 10 here denotes the size of the array called sales data, so that it can hold 10 elements. Now if you wish to change the size of the array to 15, you should write 15 here, so that the array can accommodate 15 elements, okay. And if you change the number to 20, then 20 shall be the size of the array called sales data, and in that case the array can hold 20 elements. So depending upon the size that you put here inside the bracket, okay, the array shall hold that much amount of data, or the array can hold that much amount of values or elements. Now you see the number in these boxes, okay. The numbers in these boxes are not the size of the array, they are the index of the array. So we use indexes to assign a particular value into the array, but we use size only at the time of initializing the array. Now an array can be initialized while declaring. Now take the case of this example. Now this statement consists of two parts. The first part declares the array variable by the name sales year and with the data type int, so that this array variable sales year can hold only integer values. And the second part initializes the array variable sales year with these values, that is 2008, 2009, 2010 till 2012. So this is the declaration part and this is the initialization part. And once the array sales year is initialized with these values, then I can see the first value 2008 getting stored at the index 0, okay, as depicted by this pictorial diagram of the array. The second element 2019 is stored at the index 1. The third element 2010 is stored at the index 2. The fourth element 2011 is stored at the index 3. And finally the fifth element 2012 is stored at the index 4. So this is the pictorial representation of the array variable sales year, okay, with the elements stored at their respective indexes. Now see, we need not write separate statements, okay, for assigning the values into the array variable sales data at their respective indexes like this. Instead, we can initialize the array variable sales year with these elements, okay, at the time of declaring, and this is all done in a single statement. So instead of choosing this way to initialize values into an array, choose this way. This is because this is much shorter and simpler. Now you can even manipulate the elements in an array, and that can be done using the index number of each element of an array. Okay, so values of individual elements of an array can be accessed and even manipulated using its index number. Now if you wish to change the value at the index 0 of the array called sales year from 2008 to 2000, okay, for that simply write the statement as sales 0 equal to 2000. So this changes the value 2008, okay, for the array called sales year at the index 0 to 2000, okay. So 2000 is the new value set at the index 0 for the array sales year. Again, if you wish to change the value at index 3 of the array, which is 2011, into 2014, so for that we have to write the statement as sales year 3 equal to 2014, okay. Here 2014 is the new value, okay, that has been set for the array variable sales year at the index 3. So once these two statements gets executed, the value at index 0 changes from 2008 to 2000 and the value at index 3 changes from 2011 to 2014. Now again note that the double slash indicates a comment line. So in this statement, okay, as this statement declares and initializes the array called sales year at the same time, so I have denoted it with the help of a comment line, okay, as declaring and initializing. And since this text declaring and initializing is preceded by double slash, so it denotes that it is a comment line. Now read the question in this slide. It says, write a program in Java to declare, initialize and print the contents of an array. Now with the help of this following program, I shall show you how to declare, initialize and print the contents of an array. The program starts by defining a class specified by the name example12. Now this class has a body represented by the opening parenthesis and the closing parenthesis, and inside the body of this class called example12 there is a main method as represented by public static void main, then within bracket the data type string and the array argument args. Now just as how the class has a body as represented by the opening and the closing parenthesis, in the same way the main method also has a body as represented by the opening and the closing parenthesis. Now inside the body of this main method, there are a series of Java statements. The first Java statement declares an array variable by the name numbers, okay, and assigns the elements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into this array variable called numbers. As a result, declaration and initialization is done in the same statement. The declaration part declares the array variable by the name numbers and with the data type as int, so that it can store only integer values. And the initialization part initializes this array variable called numbers with these elements, which are 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now the element 1, since this is the first element, this is stored at the index 0. In the same way, the element 2, since this is the second element, this is stored at the index 1. The element 3, since this is the third element, this is stored at the index 2. The element 4, which is the fourth element, is stored at the index 3, and the element 5, which is the fifth element, is stored at the index 4. Now remember one thing, that the index always starts with 0. So the first element 1 is stored at the index 0. Now after initializing the array, the statement terminates with a semicolon. And then the next statement declares a variable called I of data type as int with the value 0. So again, in this statement, declaration and initialization is done at the same time. Okay, the first part, int I, declares the variable called I of data type int, and the second part, I equal to 0, okay, initializes the value 0 to the variable I. As a result, as of now, the array variable called numbers holds these elements, which are 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and the variable called I holds only one value, which is 0. And once this statement terminates with a semicolon, come to the next statement. This statement uses the Java predefined class called system, and using this Java library class called system, it is creating an object called out, and with the help of this object called out, it is invoking or calling this method called println. And this method called println shall display the content of the array variable numbers at the index I into the standard output device. Okay, by default our standard output device shall be the monitor, so we are going to display the content of the array variable numbers at the index I into the monitor. Now let's find out what is the content of this array variable called numbers at the index I. Okay, we know that the value of I that was assigned was 0. Okay, so the index I takes the value 0. As a result, numbers I becomes numbers 0. So what is the value of this array called numbers at the index 0? Okay, so at the index 0, the first element is 1. Okay, so the content of this array variable numbers at the index 0 shall be 1, and as a result 1 gets displayed in the output. So here it is, this is 1. And just after 1 gets displayed in the output, the statement terminates with a semicolon, and then the next statement executes. The next statement is I++, and since plus comes after the variable called I, so this is a postfix notation. And in this postfix notation, plus is the increment operator, okay, which shall increment or increase the value of the variable called I by 1. Now since the previous value of I was 0, okay, so increasing it by 1 or incrementing it by 1 gives the new value of I as 1. This is because 0 plus 1 is 1. As a result, the statement I++ sets the new value of I from 0 to 1. And once this statement terminates with a semicolon, come to the next statement. This statement prints the content of the array variable numbers at the index I into the output. Now that the value of I has been recently changed from 0 to 1 after performing the increment operation using I++, so numbers I, okay, numbers at the index I shall be equal to numbers at the index 1. So the content of this array variable called numbers at the index 1 will be what? Let's find it out from here. Okay, we know that the content of the array variable numbers at the index 0 was 1, but the content of the array variable numbers at the index 1 is 2. Since 2 is the second element, its index is 1. As a result, the array variable numbers at the index 1 gives the value 2. This brings the value 2 into the output. As a result, till now we have printed two values under the output. Okay, the first value 1 was getting printed after we have sent the value of the array variable called numbers at the index 0, which is 1. And the second value 2 was getting printed after we have sent the value of the array variable called numbers at the index 1, which is 2. And once this statement gets executed, okay, then the next statement starts. Okay, the next statement also prints the content of the array variable called numbers at the index I. Now the value of I is still 1. Okay, the value of I is still 1. So now the array variable called numbers at the index 1 holds the value 2. So again, the content of numbers at the index I prints 2 into the output, as the value of the index I is 1, okay, which has the value 2. So as a result, under the output section, I can see the values 1, 2 and 2. Now did you notice why these values are getting printed in separate lines? Okay, the first value getting printed in the first line, the second value getting printed in the second line, and the third value getting printed in the third line. This is because of this ln just after print. Okay, ln denotes or marks the end of the line. So at first it prints the value 1 into the output, okay, then the control moves to the next line, and then in the next line it prints the value 2 into the output, okay, and then the control moves to the next line, okay, and in that line it again prints the value 2. And after printing these values, that is 1, 2 and 2 in separate lines under the output section, the body of the main method ends, okay, followed by the body of this class. So I hope this is clear, and with this I end my presentation here, as well as the chapter ends.